Okay, Dave, we are recording.
Hey,
How are you?
great. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Well, welcome to the Once Bitten podcast. Unfortunately, Lauren's not here to fire the first question at you. But what she would generally ask is she would ask me, who's coming on? What do they do in Bitcoin? And I would have said, well, his name's Dave, and he's CEO of a company called Coinbits. And then she would say, what's Coinbits, Dave?
All right, let me take that one. So I'm actually not CEO. I lead product and marketing. I work with a great team, very small, high impact team over there. And Coinbits has a great history. It's interesting. It's a strange history as far as startups go. Just because, we have really stuck to our values with how we've built slowly and surely over time and not sort of fallen prey to the promise of easy, VC money and then the sort of the problems with growth and expectations from investors that entails. And so instead of all of that, our founders have bootstrapped the company, and we've really gone slow and steady in trying to make sure that all of our unit economics work well. And so what that's resulted in is a company that's grown slowly but surely and has a really strong technical foundation that has is really what I think one of the most solid and interesting, like feature complete personal financial management apps for Bitcoiners. It was founded in 2017, and it was founded on a very simple idea, which was how do we get people Bitcoin in the easiest way possible? And one of the things that we did differently back then, and I wasn't with the company, but one of the things that was different about Coinbits was they asked not only how do we get it to them easily and hold it in our custody, but secondly, how do we make the choice as easy as possible for how much to buy? Like if you're just trying to get into Bitcoin and you don't even know how much you want or how much to invest, but you just want to kind of get involved. One of the things that people are paralyzed by sometimes is, well, how much do I buy? And I talk to people like this. They're like ready to get into the market, but they're like, do I need a whole Bitcoin? Do I want to do like, $100? Like all these things. So what Coinbits did was innovated Bitcoin roundups. So you might be familiar with roundups. Acorns sort of is the innovator in the fiat space with roundups. Coinbits was actually founded at around the same time as Acorns. And we allowed you to link your accounts, credit cards, debit cards, bank accounts. We would look at your transactions, round up all of your day-to-day transactions in your daily life to the nearest dollar, and then invest your spare change for you in Bitcoin. And so again, it was just sort of like make an account, link your cards, and then do nothing. And then you come back a few months later and you see, oh wow, I have a little bit of Bitcoin that I've been accumulating without like any impact to my budget, right? And then also making sure, really, almost since the very beginning, that you are able to be self-sovereign, able to withdraw that Bitcoin to a private wallet. And back then it was a lot harder than it is now. So that was the idea behind the company, and it grew. And one of the as we sort of thought about like what are we really offering people, we're offering them the best possible Bitcoin experience, and what people were using it for was saving. So there's these values of like saving for the long term, saving for the future that are really embedded in the features that we were creating. And so we kind of went big on that vision. So we're a great Bitcoin app for many things, but saving in particular and sort of infusing those values into people where you are delaying gratification, you are having low time preference, and we can talk about how we do that, but we present to you your time preference. There's no hiding from it. There's no like sort of extra work on your part to sort of understand what spending I need to do versus what is sort of elective and consumption based for more immediate gratification. We show that all to you, and we encourage you to do less of that and to save more in Bitcoin. So the outcomes have been fantastic. We see people. I just talked to somebody yesterday who said and this isn't just Coinbits, but I mean, it's a familiar story. Bitcoin changes your outlook and your mindset on consumption, and it makes you think twice about consuming something in the moment. And I've always something that happened to me when I was learning about Bitcoin was I multiply by 100, right? So like if I'm going to go spend $10 on something, I ask myself, is this worth $1,000, right? It's a little bit it's a little bit extreme, but I mean, if you think about it in a long enough time horizon, that is sort of a justified outlook. And sometimes it's like this $10 thing is worth $1,000 20 years from now to me because I actually really want it. And what is money for? But to sort of make your life better. But Coinbits is sort of a software experience, a website and an exchange and a place to stack sats and to safely bring them into your self-custody. That's what we're going for. We're trying to build a foundation of users that are sort of that are enlightened in that way, that are better at spending and better at saving. And so it's been a wild journey, honestly. I was new to Bitcoin, the Bitcoin industry when I started. I had been into Bitcoin for a couple of years when I joined Coinbits, but I had been working in Silicon Valley and very much sort of like the tech industry, very fiat driven, and we did good work, but to some extent it was shorter term thinking, and so at some point I really started to believe that Bitcoin was the only thing I wanted to spend my energy on, and so I found this startup that had this really interesting roundups product, and we just kind of went from there and built it into a full featured app.
So the roundups are interesting because people don't understand how powerful they are. And I've witnessed this firsthand. There's a company, and shout out to the company in France, Alexandre, who started it, called Bitstack, and exactly the same thing. You sign up, you make an account. Unfortunately for the purists, yes, there is KYC involved, and yes, you're KYCing yourself anyway because you're attaching your ATM, your daily spend card, right? Your debit card, whatever, or your credit card, whether that's Visa, Mastercard, or whoever. You have to attach that, otherwise you're not going to get the benefit of what you're doing. Because what I found uh, when I downloaded the app and I was given a test, I'm like, yeah, I'll put like my roundups on like 5x or something, because you can just keep it as like the nearest roundup, or 2x or 5x or 10x your
Yep,
roundups.
we have that too.
And right, yeah, I'll put it on 5x. Within about 3 or 4 weeks, I was like, holy crap, I've got to take this down. Like, this is nuts. This
Yeah.
this racks up quickly. And so I soon learned the power of these tiny little roundups, because yeah, you don't realize how often you are actually tapping that thing. I mean, daily, obviously, because you're doing your grocery store, you're buying whatever it is that you're out there buying. Obviously, as well, in the Bitcoin space, a lot of people are still trying to keep cash alive, and I'm a big proponent of that myself. But if you're getting gas or groceries for a couple of €100 to support a family for 4 or 5 days, you're generally going to use a card, and that's getting rounded up each and every day. And it's so quick how it compounds.
Yeah, it is. And there's pretty robust research that when you set your personal savings on automated systems or autopilot, right, you save more.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important. You're investing. If you don't do it, you're missing out on this incredible opportunity to build wealth over time. And again, like, maybe if you had we have something called saving habits, which is just kind of your standard like DCA. You can set, $100 a day or
Mm-hmm.
$1,000 a month or whatever you want. Maybe if you had faced the choice of having to set that up, you wouldn't have been so aggressive. But because you could do like 5x on roundups, you wound up saving more Bitcoin, and maybe you even turn it back, but now you have that, right? So it's sort of this, we're hacking your psychology and making it less kind of painful to defer your spending and to do better with saving. Yeah, I agree. I think roundups are a really good innovation. It's just very easy to agree to that. Okay, it's my spare change. I don't need to, I'm not going to have an impact on my budget. So that's been great. And then, talking again about these spending insights. So what we realized is we do see your transactions. We have to see them so that we can do the roundups. Well, now we have this information that we can present to you and to help you kind of have a better lens into your spending habits. And that was something that we also learned from our users because we would talk to them and they would tell us that we had such a beautiful user interface. We have design background and we're very UX strong on the UX side. And so they'd say, look, like your user interface is actually easier to use than my bank or my credit card. So I linked my cards and now I actually use Coinbits just to like look at my spending and to see my, almost my statement. And so he said, wow, like maybe we want to go big on that, right? And so we looked like what else can we do with these transactions? And, I mean, some of your listeners who know Coinbits will know that Safety Namus is a partner in the business, and it's very inspiring to us, and really has been a great influence on us. And his concept of time preference is really wonderful. So let me just like run through it for the listeners that don't know it. So time preference is this concept that you could prefer to spend in the moment and you get that benefit now, or you can delay gratification and allow the purchasing power of your money, your capital to grow over time. And so, he's written about that extensively and he talks about it on his podcast. But, to live that way, it's up to you, right? So you now have to take that, you have to read a book, you have to absorb it, and you have to go and take that and like apply it and look at your spending and say, like, what is low time preference? What is high time preference? Is so many steps that you have to take. Um, we want to make that simpler for people. So we built it into the product. So now instead of having to do your own analysis about what spending is low and high time preference, we categorize it for you. Take all your, we give you a little graph. We give you a spending profile. So we say like, you're doing well or you could improve. And we allow you to see the categories of your spending in terms of time preference. And so that's been really helpful to people because now they have an action plan. They can look at their spending. Do I have too many subscriptions that I don't need? Did I really need to eat out that many times? It hurts more when we
Mm-hmm.
gamify it a little bit and we tell you, look, this is how, you want number go up with Bitcoin. You also want number go up with your spending profile. You want to see that dial move. So month over month, you're going to be trying to do better. So that's kind of how we built upon that concept of delayed gratification and doing better with your savings.
It's counterintuitive. You'd think you'd want to be incentivizing people to spend more, to use the app more, to use their cards more, so they're buying more Bitcoin. But what you're doing is you're turning that on its head and saying to people, be more careful with your money and look after the sats, and the sats will look after you, essentially.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. I didn't think of it that way. But I think what if you really looked at how people behave, right, is if you help them see their frivolous spending and these are Bitcoiners, don't forget. So they're bought into that. So you'll see more Bitcoin purchases. Like you'll just see more people buying instantly or setting up saving habits. And we this isn't in the product yet, but we do plan to make that better where you can take a subscription that you see in your transaction history and you click and the dream is, it's going to be difficult to pull this off, but the dream is that one click would unsubscribe you from your subscription and turn that into a saving habit, right? So $15 a month, you're used to paying it. It's not going to hurt you to save more $15 a month more in Bitcoin because now you're just turning off something you don't need and saving more. So I think it will come back to us. I think, the more Bitcoiners we can mint and the more we can empower them. And as Bitcoin appreciates in purchasing power as we go, there's just going to be a lot of different things that we can do. And if we were to just try to like maximize people's frivolous spending to make a few cents here and there on Bitcoin roundups, that would be a huge missed opportunity, I think.
It's funny because again, gamification, just little practical anecdotal stories that I found from using the app in France. You'd get to the till and your groceries would come to 150 euros and 97 cents. You'd be like, fuck, it's only a 3 cent roundup. Like,
Right.
what? You're like looking around the till. What can I buy? What can I buy? You're at the gas station, right? And it clicks, and you look up, and it's like 72, 80, 89, and you're like, no, like a bit more. Just squeak it. Just get me over, so I can get the 99 cent roundup.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned like KYC. Could you say more about that? Like, how do you think yeah, how do you think about the importance of privacy and KYC with Bitcoin? Because that's something that I get asked a lot.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have two camps, right? That we should be completely private. Bitcoin is peer to peer. There should be, no leakage of our data. And then the other side of the coin is, well, how are we going to get as many people onto Bitcoin as possible? And there's a role that exchanges have to play. And if exchanges want to swim in these waters and be able to offer you the services that they want to offer you, like your Coinbits or like Bitstack or Relay here in Switzerland, who just recently had to go full KYC. They'd managed to skirt around very kind of low KYC right up until just the start of this month, and it's a creep, and it's unfortunate because you've got politicians and policymakers and regulators hindering the growth of these apps and hindering market competition, which I think is critical. The more people that there should be another 10 relays, there should be another 10 Coinbits, there should be another 10 Bitstacks, and that is what is going to drive everybody to create a better product, which is better for the marketplace. So with this overregulation and this giving up of our data, we're leaking, I think, too much. I hope we've reached that point. I hope that the pendulum has swung far enough now that we can be left alone for the next few years. I doubt we will, but yeah, and just thinking about like the data you hold now, because I spoke to Relay about this for many many sessions. They now become a honeypot. The regulators and the policymakers are forcing a honeypot, a centralized honeypot, because you are forced to hold people's data.
Sure.
And the advertisers out there, they're going to soon know, if they don't already, that Coinbits exists, and so that these other apps. And in the case of Coinbits, they're going to know, oh, they track and they tell their customers what they're buying each month. That's valuable information. So I wonder, how have you thought about that in house? Have you been approached yet by one of these big advertisers that want to come and buy the data from you, and or have you had that conversation? What if this happens and there's a lot of
Yeah.
money put on the table?
Well, you sure. We definitely have had that conversation. And I mean, we use Plaid, which is a service that connects banks to fintechs, and it's very, very standard, right? So like pretty much almost any in the United States, we're US only today, although that's not entirely true. We allow you to buy Bitcoin if you're overseas, but uh, it has to be direct to wallet and it's sort of this instant transaction. And that can be tough because a lot of your credit card companies and banks will deny that. So we're kind of struggling to kind of break through all of that. In the US, it's a much more mature product, and we have thought about that, and we use Plaid. So Plaid is the industry standard, and they know who you are, and they stitch everybody together. So it wouldn't be just us that has the data, unless the idea of being private. I'm a huge advocate of privacy and transaction privacy. the problem is that in the situation we have today, if you build only for privacy, and you try to ensure that people's Bitcoin experience is totally anonymous and private, and with CoinJoin and non-KYC Bitcoin and so on, like I'm the last person to criticize that. That's incredibly important. The problem is there's another, I think the higher leverage thing that we need to engage in is to build more Bitcoiners. I don't know any private Bitcoiner privacy advocate that, started that way, right? And how did they get there? Well, they probably went through a journey where they obtained Bitcoin and then later on, attempted to sort of anonymize themselves, get forward privacy, or maybe they have a KYC stack of Bitcoin and then they have another stack of Bitcoin that can't be linked back to them. That all makes sense, but ultimately, I think we're very mission driven. Don't get me wrong, and our mission is to ensure that people are protected from what's coming. And what's coming is a total realignment of global finance around Bitcoin. And when that happens, um, you know, of course, like there could be state attacks on Bitcoin holders. I don't think there's a great danger of that in the United States. I think that we've sort of past that point. It could always happen, but we have public companies that hold Bitcoin on their balance sheets. We have BlackRock. We have, all these sort of insider type companies that work with sort of the extensions of the administrative state, the CFOs and so on, and the regulators. And we have very strong property rights, and Bitcoin is sort of seen as property. So it would be very difficult, I think, to launch like a full frontal attack on Bitcoiners in the United States and succeed. And so where that leaves you is, okay, well then what is the danger? What is the main concern? The main concern then is making sure that the facts on the ground are as favorable as possible for Bitcoin, and that means mass adoption. That means that as many people as possible, and not just holding Bitcoin on exchanges either. We're very passionate about self-custody. Everyone can do it. I work with people in my community, all ages, old and young, but like actually old. I mean, I'll be honest, like I've been helping a lot of people who are retirees, who are understanding the opportunity here and also the way that Bitcoin can protect them from what's coming. And it's just not, it depends on the person. Sometimes people are a little bit more technology adverse, but even the most technology adverse people are able to do it. They get through it. It's not that hard. And so we're very passionate about that. We want to create as many people as possible who have digital property in their own custody. And if it can be tied to their name, so be it. It's property. So their real estate is tied to their name. Their bank account is tied to their name. This is another thing that's tied to their name, but they have a lot more leverage, I think, than they would if they recoiled from this whole process because they were worried about like KYC and being identified. So I do think we have, I mean, and I recently wrote an article about how important privacy is in Bitcoin Magazine. Privacy is the next big thing that we have to solve. It's a big deal. And the article is sort of clickbaity, but I actually don't think so. I've been told that by people that I was a little bit too inflammatory with the title, which is that Bitcoin does not offer final settlement until it offers privacy. And the reason is that if you don't have privacy, like ultimately you could use, right? You could use coercive power to get people to reverse a transaction. If you have two parties and then you have some third party come in with maybe power of law over those parties and say this final quote unquote final transaction, final settlement on the Bitcoin blockchain, not final. You need to give that back, right? Or we take action against you. With privacy, with private transactions, they can't do that anymore. And it does become finally settled. And so privacy is extremely important. I'm excited about silent payments. Silent payments is a new innovation in Bitcoin that will put private Bitcoin transactions on the base chain, on the base layer. And there are people that are working on functional prototypes at this point, and it may become integrated to Bitcoin Core, maybe first quarter of 2025 is what I've heard at the latest estimate. So we're a ways away. But now that there's really high likelihood that Operation Choke Point 2.0 will be ended in the United States, uh, given the results of the recent election, that gives us the time, right, to create this to improve Bitcoin and make it more private. I'm extremely bullish on private Bitcoin. Until we get there, anybody on the fence about this stuff, just get off zero. Like just put this aside for a minute. It's kind of like, I talk to people who are like worried about their communication being surveilled. And it's kind of the same thing. It's like, well, okay, but it's very possible that, a lot of these encrypted apps, because you can attack the phone itself, right? It may be that, your signal messages they're encrypted and you can't get them off the signal server. I believe that that's probably true, regardless of who's in leadership over there. But you can attack the phone because your phone has decrypted messages on it. And so perhaps people are reading those messages, but is the alternative just to not communicate and to not organize and to not like plan and work together to drive change in the world the way that you want? Like that's worse. So be careful with what you say, but don't say nothing and disengage. That would be like the worst possible outcome. So I think about that. So at Bitcoin KYC, same thing. It's like just do it, learn it, get involved, and then also on the other side of that, start to understand Bitcoin privacy.
Yeah.
That was a long-winded
No,
explanation, but
it's well said. And yeah, the thing about silent payments, it's interesting that do you think that has spawned out of the like the clampdown on the coin join services, for example, that we've seen over the last 2 years, because we had the Tornado Cash guys and we had the Samurai guys, then Wasabi stepped out of the picture and said, you know what, like we don't want any part of this anymore. And good luck to those guys. I think that's probably the right decision, knowing the individuals involved.
mhm.
Yeah, it's been a weird space
Well,
in the
but those
last
are
few years.
but that's I mean, I'm not surprised by that. Anybody look, the whole point about Bitcoin being decentralized so that there's nobody to there's no figurehead to attack. Satoshi's anonymous, Satoshi disappeared. We know this mythology, we know this story very well. The attacks on the coin join, the centralized coin join services is like the least surprising thing that could possibly happen. Of course, it's going to happen. That's why you need to build protocols, that are decentralized. So I have I'm not saying anything bad about any of those guys. I'm just saying it's not surprising, and it just means that we need to do what we always knew we were supposed to be doing and had to do, which is to build decentralized protocols. It's funny because the state will say things like, well, in Europe, it's different with Lagarde and her war on cash. But in the United States, we still at least have advocates for cash on the basis of cash offering private transactions. I still think there's like enough sort of leadership, sentiment in the leadership that like that financial privacy is sort of it's not enshrined as a right, but it sort of is one. And and so all you have to do is say, look, it's no different than the way that you advocate for cash being available to people so that they can just use cash with no third party and no surveillance. It's the same thing. So I think that there's a justification there that is really or is really is solid. It
Mhm.
draws upon shared values that we all have. So, but yeah, you don't want to centralize these sorts of privacy technologies. So silent payments is going to be on base chain. It's going to be part of the protocol. That's how to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up about the difference between Europe and the US when it comes to cash. And I've never really thought about this before, but there's something so deeply culturally ingrained about the US dollar and the American people.
Mm.
It's part of everyday life. It's part of every single person, every single American knows the US dollar from when they grew up. Whereas in
Mm.
Europe, we've had francs, we've had Deutschmarks, we've had pesetas, we've had guilders, we've had florins, we've had francs. I've said francs, excuse me, krona, and whatever else. Completely disappear overnight and switch
Yeah.
into euro. So it's a massive psyop, clearly. Um,
Yeah, well, yeah. Once when I was visiting France, and this was a while ago. I don't know if this still goes on, but I was at a grocery store, and when is this still true? When you're checking out, it will show you euros and francs both next to each other.
no, not anymore. It's just euros.
Okay. And I asked why that was, and she was like, elderly people do not like the euro, and they get very angry when
Yeah,
they only see it in euros. And so yeah, I think there's sort of like a generational attachment to certain forms of money, but somehow you were able to adopt the euro. But now there's this famous clip of Christine Lagarde saying that, like, if you, I think it's 1,000 euros, right? If you do a transaction over 1,000 euros, you are breaking a law. Like, you're not allowed to do that in cash, I mean, right?
yeah,
Um, they would like to do that here, but I don't know, man. I don't think that's happening. I think now we're gonna see. The thing is, CBDCs are inevitable. This is another like controversial view that I have. I
yeah.
am not. I am opposed to CBDCs and I think we should do what we can to delay them. But CBDCs are this brand. It's now like this weak brand. The word CBDC will now never be used by people in power because they realize the brand is terrible. But all it is really like a series of incremental improvements to financial plumbing, such that payments are faster, cheaper, and more reliable. And we want that. And so, like, the market wants that. So it will happen. It will just happen incrementally. And the ability to surveil transactions will come along as sort of and to censor transactions will come along as sort of like a natural consequence of just the market choosing to increase the efficiency of the US dollar. So it's not something that I think we can just say is something we can stop. We have to go a different direction and set the conditions under which financial privacy um, is protected, and that could come from, I think technology and the protocol level, I think, is the most compelling because it doesn't rely on these sort of human factors, but it could also be legislation, force of law, and so on, that protects financial privacy. But CBD, the idea that, like, we're just going to continue using you know, these fiat rails in the United States, these like banking software that was written in COBOL in like the 1960s, like that's like it's just so outdated and so poor for the task that is running a dynamic leader in global finance. It's just like those old technologies will be phased out and we're going to use better ones. So in that world, you need to make sure that you have alternatives. Bitcoin is that alternative. We just need to make sure that enough people have it that it becomes viable to build, to kind of to transition as much economic activity over to the Bitcoin blockchain as possible, as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I share your sentiment that CBDCs are inevitable because they've got to take it somewhere. Um, if they want to, maintain control over people's spending and tighten their grip
Yeah,
and give us this, in air quotes, great reset or
right.
debt jubilee or whatever. And it's nice to know that we've got a 15-year head start on this because I think it's going to come down to a battle of education. And there's something else. I mean, Bitcoin, the ultimate Trojan horse. If they if they start pushing out and rolling out these CBDCs and validating the idea of a purely digital currency, then there's one over here that's been working for, a decade and a half, guys. What are you going to where are you going to put your trust? Or it's going to make people more curious.
Right.
Let's put it that way.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, because the CBDCs will be based on the technologies that Bitcoin invented, right? I mean, they don't necessarily need a blockchain because they could just have a centralized private ledger if they wanted to and sort of expose as much of the ledger as they have to for certain purposes. So you don't necessarily need a public blockchain. Um, you don't need proof of work, right? Because you have like centralized authority that's validating transactions. But you will have, you know, public-private key pairs, and you'll have some of the technology that underlies Bitcoin. So, yeah, I agree. I think it's sort of like it's almost like anti-progress to think that we wouldn't have CBDCs. It just seems. I mean, why, anybody who understands the fiat plumbing, have you ever seen on Twitter, I think Alex Leishman shared this graphic, maybe River even made it themselves of like the plumbing of actually how money is moved and how the Fed creates money through fixing the price of money with interest rates and so on. It's like you look at this little, you have to zoom in because there's just like hundreds and hundreds of little arrows and boxes and all these, banks and central banks and clearinghouses and um, it's a total mess. And so it costs money. Like that costs a lot of money to have that much inefficiency. So it's just like you're not gonna be able to resist the natural um, simplification of that. And the word CBDC, if you use it for that, sure, that's inflammatory, but that's coming. And we just need to arm ourselves with encryption. We need to arm ourselves with encryption. That's what this comes down to. Messages, money, private people, individuals need to learn how to use encryption to interact with other people and counterparties in transactions that have no third party and that cannot be seen by a third party. That's it. Um, I'm excited about Nostr too. I think that's like a cool innovation. I actually tonight there's Nostrville over in Bitcoin Park, which is near me. I'm near Nashville, so I'm going to check that out. Do you use Nostr?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I'm posting there daily, and it's getting better and better as each week passes. So it's great to
Is it?
see.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I I try to use it. I'm interested in like a lot of different stuff, and I always wind up going back to X because Nostr. Maybe I'm like following the wrong people, but I don't feel like there's a lot of discourse besides Bitcoin on there. Is that what you find?
Yeah, it's a real echo chamber at the moment for sure, because
Yeah,
the first people that are being attracted there are obviously our tribe.
yeah.
I don't bang up against many other people. I don't think. I think it's pretty much primarily Bitcoiners that have found me over there. And I'm posting. Yeah, I'm posting 2 or 3 times a day. What I've got in the habit of doing is copy pasting what I tweet, and then put that into. I'm using Amethyst on my phone, or I'll use Primal on desktop.
Hmm.
I'm running like 10 or 11 different relays. So
Oh, are you? Interesting.
yeah, yeah, it's definitely picking up steam. Um, I think. Well, let's have a quick look. Takes a little while, obviously, to build up your followers and follow the people that you want to find. Um,
Yeah, I love the idea. I really hope it happens. One of the things I'm going to ask tonight is like, how do we um like how do we get more different communities interested in Nostr? And it seems like,
mhm. Yeah.
and I've heard resistance from this about this idea. Maybe you could tell me what you think, but some of the people that work on Nostr and developers who build apps and so on don't like this idea. But I just like you just said, like you post on X and then Nostr, I just feel like there's got to be some way of making it so that I can just use Nostr and read everything on X, right? And then if that I follow, so just like kind of recreate those feeds, maybe even without, I don't know if that would violate X's terms of service, but you should be
Mhm.
able to just like build a feed your feed in X on Nostr, and then maybe when you interact with it, could we somehow, you know, flow that comment through to your X account so that like your X interactions are a subset of the superset of your interactions which happen on Nostr. It's something like this. Otherwise, like you're not going to be able to kind of like shift that momentum unless there's a real value proposition for those people over on X to use this. And now with Elon and the success of making X free and open, there's even almost like it's great. I'm huge supporter of all of that, but it makes it actually like harder to convince people to switch over because they're like, this is working fine.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know. And this, like, for example, if I open my app, it tells me I've got 5,100 followers. But if I look on a different relay on my desktop, it tells me I've got 20,100 followers. So, what is
Oh,
it? You know,
wow.
there's still a lot of like crazy stuff like that. And I'm a big believer in, keeping Noster weird, as Rockstar Dev would quote.
Yeah.
But we're very, very early days, and I've played around with them all since they've come out. All the way
Mhm.
back to Sphinx Chat
Oh,
when
I played
Paul
with that. I was
when Paul
excited about
launched it.
that when that came out. What happened
Yeah.
with that? Is that like a dead project or is that
Well,
still?
I met Paul in Oslo, and he said they're still building. They just went completely silent, completely dark, completely quiet, but they've got something, and they're very excited about what it's going to become. And then, if you remember,
Hmm.
what did we have after that? Tusky, Mastodon, Zion. Um, I'm missing one in there somewhere. Like Heat showed a lot of
Yeah.
promise,
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, Nostr seems to be standing the test of time. Bitcoiners are flighty. We go and we try these things, and then if we get bored, we just end all back up on Twitter and back where the original party was. But
Do
yeah,
you
Nostr,
use
there's something going on here.
do you use Zaps? Like, are you finding that that works for you?
Yeah, yeah, zapping around all the time, and yeah, it's working well. It's a very interesting project, and
Hmm.
one I'm glad to see get the traction that it's got. But I want to ask you actually, before we get on a different rabbit hole, about your actual Bitcoin rabbit hole journey. Where were you before? Because you said you come from the Valley. You were like kicking around in Silicon Valley tech world. What were you doing, and what led you to Bitcoin?
Oh, yeah, sure. I could definitely get into that. I mean, so when my background in education was focused on human computer interaction. So HCI is a field where um, you try to figure out, like, based on human physiology, how to build interfaces with these complex machines or computers so that people understand what the computer is doing and are able to, perform some task. Like, that's really the academic field of HCI. And I was particularly interested in the sense of touch because in modern computers, less so today, but definitely, well, I mean, we're using our eyes and our ears right now. We're not using the sense of touch at all to have this conversation. So not much has changed, but it has changed a bit since now we have mobile devices that have haptic motors in them and so on. But back when I started, there was really none of that, and so I was very interested in kind of like unlocking this ability to use your sense of touch to engage with data and people over the internet. The dream at the time that I would always talk about was, handshakes, hugs, and high fives over the internet. Like, the internet might be causing us to kind of feel alienated from each other. You're able to kind of people's it's known, right? You're more rude and have a shorter fuse online. You meet the same person, and you're never going to be so abusive and abrasive to somebody that you're in the room with. And so, if we're going to bring sort of if the internet can live up to its promise, that would mean that it would be as seamless as possible communicating digitally and physically. So we need to kind of unlock the other sensory channels that we use every day to exist in the physical world. We're going to bring that online. That was the overarching goal, and the form that it took was studying the human sense of touch and building technologies that engage a sense of touch. So, like I said, you have haptic motors in phones and watches. But there's exotic things like you can modulate the friction of a surface so that as you move your finger across the surface, you can feel a texture. You could use ultrasonic beams and focus them on the skin to actually have a remote touch that is displayed to you. And those things exist, and they're still they have a limited application in consumer products, but they do have applications and they're still being developed. So super exciting field even today. I wound up working for a company that was really the leading innovator in all of that, and it was a tremendously awesome experience. I can't say enough about that era of my life. It was so much fun and challenging. As sort of the internet, so when I started, physical devices like phones and other, even PDAs like back in the day, right? These plastic devices, these consumer experiences were all still very different from each other. Even game controllers didn't have a standard form factor. And so in our labs, we were building like wild things, like weird stuff, like shape changing phones that can like move across the table to you when you get a message, and game controllers that change shape in your hand, and all kind of cool stuff, right? But what happened was, driven by the tremendous economic incentives of the content industry monetizing content, that all sort of collapsed into these standard form factors such that you could build a content library, right, that could be reliably displayed on that device's form factor. And so you just have a lot less creativity with all of this. So now, we went from lots of interesting shapes of phones to black rectangles. Everything's a black rectangle.
Mm-hmm.
Tablets are black rectangles. Game controllers are standardized too. They're not black rectangles, but they're very standard.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden you had like this sort of, the innovation was pushed up into the content layer. And then we started innovating with haptic content. So like delivering the sense of touch over the internet to these devices with standard form factors. And that was really awesome too, and very interesting. The problem that I encountered there, though, is that the content monetization, and this is talked about actually as one of the things that Bitcoin solves, right, is that monetizing content, because of the because of the cost of transaction with fiat and using fiat systems is so high, you can't really build viable micropayment like architectures for content, which means you need to kind of deliver economic value in larger chunks, which means that it's more sort of, I guess you could say even like capital intensive, which leads you to advertising and sort of monetizing engagement, right? So because the internet transitioned to sort of being um, all about monetizing content, and because the only way you could monetize that content was with advertising, then the content became only about driving engagement and at any cost, short-term gratification, dopamine hits, like small things, like silly frivolity that like nobody will look back on their lives and say, I really wish I had watched more TikTok. Like nobody will say that. But this system has been tuned, and that's, sorry to dig on TikTok, but it just feels like that's like kind of the most like salient example. But so the whole internet economy has been tuned to your dopamine receptors, um, and um, and we found that haptics actually is great at that. Honestly, like it's really good if you want to get somebody's attention. Obviously, if somebody walks into the room right now and just taps your shoulder, the whole thought process that we're having this conversation will in your brain will go poof. Sorry, poof, and you will just turn and you'll give your attention to something else, right? So because the nerve endings for your sense of touch do that, they bypass sort of all these higher cognitive processes and really touch this primal instinct, something's happening to my body. So it's very immediate, which is very cool for many applications. Um, but if sort of your only outlet for all of that is to build systems to allow advertisers to poke you, that starts to become, for me, less interesting. And I wanted to go back to this uh, first principle of like, how do we make the internet a more humane place and a more vibrant place? And so actually, Bitcoin, I had discovered it at some point, and as I learned more and more about it and became more and more passionate, I realized like this is it. Like this is going back to first principles. If we can build systems that allow you to transmit value in small amounts over the internet, arbitrary distances, the handshakes, hugs, and high fives, those small moments actually take the form of sats, um and that's like where that's what we need to do to fix what has gone so terribly wrong with the internet. So that's kind of what brought me to Bitcoin.
Wow, yeah, it's very, very interesting. When you're talking about like haptic touch or haptic touch, you
Haptics, yeah,
haptic.
HAPTICS, yeah.
That's like, for example, the keyboard on a smartphone, right? Where it might make that little vibration on your thumb or your forefinger.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And actually, the company I worked for invented that idea. It sounds sort of um, now it feels obvious because it's so widespread, but at the time it was like this idea that we had at the company. It wasn't my idea, but I worked on teams, and it was like you could actually couple a motor to a screen, and you could create a mechanical link so that you can have, because it's not trivial to just to make the screen feel like a button click, like a crisp. So it was hard to kind of get the vibration to propagate across the glass of that screen in a way that made
Mhm.
it feel like a click. But so that was like a new idea. We could actually make buttons on touch screens with motors pulsing. That was new. And there are a lot of things that people take for granted now that were new at the time. It was really cool to work to innovate in that way. Um, and I think we did a lot. I mean, smartwatches, smartphones, and game controllers, you expect haptics. Those are all, standard applications. If you were to buy a device without it, you would probably notice. But again, I think there's just my concerns about like privacy and coercion, it just started to become like so prominent. I used to be like this big tech optimist, like Ray Kurzweil, the singularity is near. I was so excited for technology to help us like transcend our limitations and bring us this new world of abundance. Peter Diamandis talks about, abundance is our future. That was my message for so long. And then with this sort of overbearing surveillance and undermining of people's sort of ability to, I mean, just undermining their ability to even have like an attention span, and all the issues with children and apps and digital technologies just started to make me feel um, really pessimistic about the whole thing. And I thought that there was no solution, honestly. I mean, I used to give talks on this, and I had nothing good to say about any of this. And not to kind of it's sort of tempting to look and say, okay, well, Bitcoin's the answer to everything. Bitcoin fixes this. That seems like overly reductive and overly simplified. And that's a fair criticism because you never want to sort of, I guess, get caught up in sort of this idea that there's one silver bullet that will solve all problems. So I understand sort of the skepticism about Bitcoin fixes this as like a mantra. But Bitcoin fixes this thing I'm talking about. I think it does. I think Bitcoin fixes the problem of people engaging with each other and online in like an authentic way.
Ah, interesting. And that's where those apps come in, for example, on Noster, uh, the way I
Exactly.
see it.
Yes,
Because
precisely.
if people are zapping you sats and you understand what those sats represent, that's a whole different feeling. It's not even a dope. I don't get dopamine like it's weird. I don't know how to explain it. I've never even thought about it really too much until having this conversation. But obviously, we are conditioned to like the to be addicted to these things, especially social media. And you mentioned TikTok earlier. And to a certain extent, Twitter, the algorithms, the way that, we are fed certain things to either trigger us or to give us a dopamine hit. And if we come up with some snarky comment or some philosophical trope, then we might get a lot of retweets, we might get a lot of likes, and that gets the dopamine little thing going, and before you
Yeah,
know it, you're checking again 10 minutes later.
absolutely.
And it's a trap. And as a father, I see it with my kids. It drives
Mm,
me nuts, because I understand the way these things are set up to keep them looking at them, to
absolutely.
eat up their attention.
Yeah.
And I can imagine, having worked there and worked on some of those protocols, some of those ideas, some of those projects that were probably directed specifically at the younger demographic. Like, how do we keep these guys holding on to their phones longer? And then you have the other dirty side of tech, which Jack Cruz has talked about a lot. He gave a talk in Prague about the harmful light, and I've had the daylight computer guys on,
Mm.
Angel and Tristan. Um,
Yeah.
that's really interesting stuff, and it's great to see that Bitcoiners like Jack and like Angel and Tristan are raising awareness, and there's others doing it as well. And now you coming on and talking about what went on behind the scenes when a classic example, right? The handheld things. We all grew up. We look about the same age, playing Mega Drives or Sega, Nintendos, whatever. I remember the first time I held one of these new age controllers that vibrate in your hand, where you're like, oh right, you play a football game or something and you get tackled and it vibrate in your hand. And little things like that, you don't think are going to make too much of a difference, but it's
Oh yeah.
huge.
Did you know that? I mean, next time you use Amazon, I don't know if you use it in where you are, but when you put a product in your cart, you get a nice little haptic vibration that feels very, very pleasant. And
Huh.
I don't
Didn't
know
know.
like what data they have on that, but I would not be surprised if that enhances purchasing behaviors for them. A lot of this stuff is just very, very, very subtle. But the thing though is with micropayments, you may get micropayments are incredibly fascinating because there's a whole it's like unlocking a huge chunk of the economy that is just like walled off, right?
Mhm.
Um, like so when you go on Twitter and you like something, there's no value transmitted there. So how do you how do you keep that content afloat? You pay out creators based on what? Like ads. So the money always comes from ads. But like I almost feel like the dope what I'm saying is I guess the dopamine of receiving sats in a zap is like not as harmful. It's a purchase. Like it's
Mm.
it's rewarding you directly from readers. It's not filtered through an algorithm that has sort of been distorted by forces that you aren't privy to. So, you could get into a loop where you're like just going after the dopamine and you're just trying to figure out like how to get more zaps. But like in some sense, that's just doing business, right? All you're doing is creating value and receiving value in return. So, I mean, I feel like that's a completely almost like just different situation. Um, and that's what we should be engaging in is creating value for each other. So it's like a real signal. The Zap is a signal of value in an economy in a way that a like is not. It's a proxy for value, but it's like too far removed. And so and so I think like for example, your engage all the people that engage with you on Twitter or TikTok or whatever, and you look at your engagements and you're like, oh cool, I have all this engagement, I feel good. Well, if there was the ability to have zaps, but like you're like, oh wow, I have all this engagement, but nobody's like paying me for it. That's a signal too. You're like, this is actually frivolity. Like people may be watching me dance around like a maniac, but like I'm not really like nobody's paying me for it. So I think there's something there where zaps are, and even just anything like anytime you have an interaction online that people would have been willing to engage in voluntary exchange of money, but can't because you have to link your card, and then there's a you know um, fees on a card transaction that makes only certain purchase amounts worthwhile, and like all the friction around payments and having this like sort of minimum payment amount that makes any sense to send over the internet before it starts to come worthwhile. Everything under that amount is like cut out, right? So you now can't do you there's a an enormous part of the economy that's just walled off from you. So SATs as a mechanism for micropayments, it's been talked about since the beginning. And so anybody who's been in this space in a long time will probably say that what I'm saying is not revolutionary at all. But I just think that I think that the technology is actually getting good enough now. My hope is in the next few years we start to see the Zap interaction from Noster start to proliferate elsewhere.
Hmm. And to bring this back to like the list of points that we wanted to talk about today, and what you're doing at Coinbits,
Yeah.
and this idea of gamification and getting people looking more at the app and whatever else is responsible. What you've listed here is responsible gamification in financial apps.
Yes.
Uh, what, how how do you think about that? And what is how do you think about like what is response? How am I being responsible if I'm trying to shape someone's behavior? You know that it's kind of uh,
Yeah,
dichotomy
I
there.
understand. Well, because I think maybe yeah, so this concept of responsible gamification is a term that I've been promoting, and I really believe in it because like once you understand human behavior, you can't just ignore it. And as you're building, software experiences, you leverage that. That's what you do. But
Hmm.
you also do, but you do that not only in software, you do that all over the place. You engage with other people such that you you try to get people to behave in the way that you want, right? In
Hmm.
business, even just among friends, it's a common thing. It's almost like a foundation for how we communicate. So responsible gamification. So we know how gamification works now. Gamification, for the people that are not familiar, it's like this concept in interface design, which is you can use you can use inspiration from gaming and this idea of, things like leveling up, things like leaderboards, things like providing feedback in the moment, points, fanfare. When you reach certain levels, you give people like a fanfare, which is very immersive from a sensory perspective. It might sound and look beautiful. Like when you win, or if you've ever been to Las Vegas or one of these
Hmm.
casinos, you see or hear somebody win at a slot machine. It's like the beat, the sounds, the music, and the lights are very beautiful. That's like that moment of like reining you in with gamification, and that's just going to be there whether you ignore it or not. Responsible gamification. I think what you're asking is who decides what's responsible,
Hmm.
right? That's the problem. It's like, um, who should say I'm the one that's deciding that that's responsible for gamification and not? There's no answer to that. Like, there's no way to define that beyond what are the values that we have? What's the energy that I want to put out in the world? It's up to all of us. Like, we can act in a way to our to people in the world. We can act in a way that is destructive or constructive, and we can choose how to apply our talents. We can choose how to apply our energy. We can choose what projects we work on, and we can define for ourselves like what responsible gamification is. We have to, and then we can apply that. So I mean, there's no just standard for all that's responsible gamification. I think that if you understand Bitcoin and you've read the foundational works in Bitcoin, and then you look at how Coinbits works, you would probably say that that's responsible gamification because if you look at your your behavior on the platform over time, you're going to notice that you're maybe saving more for the future, you're acting more responsibly, and so it's up to you to decide that. But I think that on an individual level, again, the projects we work on, the companies we work for, the things we build, it's up to us to decide for ourselves how to define responsibility there and then take action because there's very little that like on a global scale, there's very little that you have control over. Like, let's be honest, right? But the way that something that you do control is how you spend your time and how
Mhm.
you spend your energy and how you apply your talents. And so every individual just has to come to that conclusion on their own and be really honest with themselves about what they're building and why. And then, everybody's situation is different. I don't mean to criticize here, but over time you are hopefully um, making changes and decisions in your life to live your values and to make sure that the way that you apply your talents is consistent with what you want to see put out into the world. And so I think I would just sort of define it that way.
And to segue into, another way to think about responsibility is that's now on you on how you decide that you are going to use the app and how you're being gamified in air quotes and pick up on the cues, I suppose. Like, for example, self custody. I know you're going to be pushing a lot of education that way. That would be a perfect example of okay, I know I'm being gamified here. How responsible am I going to be? Am I going to ignore that, or am I going to pick up on that cue? And where's this going to take me? And is that the kind of way that you'd like people to be thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think just look at how it works. Look at your consequences in your life. Are you, when you use our spending insights feature and you look at your low time preference spending versus your high time preference spending, and you feel motivated to spend less on frivolity and spend more on saving in Bitcoin. It's, if that's not a value to you, that's okay. There's a lot of other financial products you can use. It's just sort of you have to understand like, fitness apps are like this, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
people will people will allow apps to like harass them or make them feel guilty because they know that like the reward on the other side is I'm trying to get in shape. So, even if in the moment that I'm doing one of these reps, that I'm lifting weights, I'm like cursing at my personal trainer because I'm so like in the moment, this is so painful. I'm paying this person because like I have this broader goal. So like, I think people opting in to something that signal too that they value this and oftentimes will people will invite into their lives something that in the moment is more painful but pays off later. So
It's a good example. It's a great example. These kind of watches that people wear to monitor their steps, maybe, or to so that they know how far they've walked each day, and that they feel as though they're being, they're responsibly gamifying that to help get them, into better shape.
yeah.
The sleep one, when people, I've had people show me, oh yeah, look, blah 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 blah, blah. Like, yeah, look at my sleep patterns last night. And I'm thinking,
Yeah.
I can't help thinking to myself, like, whoa, hang on a minute. You're trying to sleep better. And you've got an electrical device that's connected to Bluetooth that you might be sleeping directly under your polyester filled pillow right next to your head. You've got non-native electromagnetic frequencies going haywire all over the place. Like, think about that. you know?
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Well, no, well, I agree. I actually don't monitor my sleep, but I've been thinking about doing it. But maybe you're making me rethink that. I don't know.
It depends how, right?
So gamification is really powerful when the rewards for what you're doing aren't immediately apparent. Because like
Hmm.
if you, right? So like humans are really bad at foregoing indulgence, right, for the long term. If you go and you start an exercise routine and you're trying to get in shape and you're really out of shape, you go to the gym the first day and then that evening you're like looking in the mirror, right? And you're like, oh, nothing happened. Well, but that's like a natural psychological thing that people go through. And so the difference is you could use technology to bring basically, so you have this feedback that you're going to get eventually. You're going to look in the mirror one day and see change.
Hmm.
That's like 6 to 8 weeks from now. So what technology can do and gamification techniques can do is take that feedback that's in the future and like bring it forward in time to you so that like you're able to stay on task for a longer time to achieve a goal. If you don't, humans are very bad at, um, if you don't have feedback about something, it's very hard for you to judge whether you should continue doing it. So technology is great at providing feedback. So that's how it can be used responsibly is to take, good outcomes that the person opts into. They're like, I want to be on this program to save in Bitcoin or to get in shape. They opt into it, and then the technology gives them these bite-sized pieces of feedback on their way before they actually see true results in the world, and it'll keep them on task.
The last thing on the list that
Yeah.
we've done a good job here. Actually, we've stayed pretty true to it. The yeah, you dropping a bomb here. Convergence with AI and nuclear power.
Oh yeah.
There's
Yeah.
there's an interesting little dangled carrot. So, what's on your mind here?
Well, it's actually thinking about micropayments and Balaji actually had this really interesting um, PowerPoint, I guess, way back in the day, it's like 5 years ago, called the Machine Payable Web, where he talks about how Bitcoin micropayments will allow for, I guess at the time it wasn't really as much called AI, but online automations to coordinate. I think I see a really interesting opportunity where nuclear and other forms of power, like we have to dramatically increase the amount of power that we have available to us for the AI dream to happen. We maybe need to triple or quadruple our power output in the United States. Um, Nuclear takes a long time to build, maybe shorter than we've been thinking before, because maybe we can build it in a modular way, but it will still take years to build. In the meantime, we're going to have to consume, you know, uh, uh, we're going to have to consume oil and gas. But AI it has potential to create such an enormous productivity boom and so much abundance that the market will just choose to do that. Like this idea, it's funny because the politicians in the United States that have been more vocal about reducing energy consumption, extremely vocal actually, and that was what their whole political philosophy was based on. Like before the AI boom really started, they're real quiet now. They don't. Nobody talks about like reducing overall energy consumption because they're looking at the numbers and they're like, it's a sea change. I mean, it's a complete change in our economy that's going to happen over the next few years with AI in the next ten years or so. So now it's just about how you maximize energy output while also being environmentally responsible. That's very important, but it's no longer about reducing energy consumption overall. So we're going to have the nuclear power is going to be something that it's really the only thing that can meet that need over the long period of time, over sort of a long time scale. So those projects will happen, and then I'm sure you know the story about how Bitcoin offers load balancing and is like the miners are the purchasers of last resort for excess power. So Bitcoin plays a role there already. But then with AI and micropayments and automation, what you'll be able to do is monetize individual compute cycles of in AI, right? So now, again, this is the same thing we were talking about. Now, today, I subscribe to ChatGPT or OpenAI's subscription, and I subscribe to Anthropic subscription to Claude, all these because we have no way of transmitting small incremental amounts of value. So I have to pay $10 a month to use a certain amount, and then like I use a little bit less, I use a little bit more. It's like not efficient. It's not an efficient market. But like if I could pay for compute cycles for each of my queries, that works better for both of us. Um, and so that's the first step, is to sort of, as we're passing these tokens in and out of these models, is to monetize those with sats and actually represent the value being transmitted in these micropayments. And then what's actually even more interesting, maybe after that, is this idea that agents will proliferate themselves and actually collaborate themselves um, to get some kind of task done. There will be one agent that has certain access to data, but not other. They'll have to go engage a different agent. And so in order for that, I mean, ultimately that's like economic activity, right? Because it's about distribution of resources, consumption of resources. And so for agents, the only form of money that agents could use to coordinate economic activity is sats, because it has to be final settlement, and it can't use like the legacy banking system, because that's built for humans, and that's the laws and regulations, everything. Also, you can't get smaller than a cent. Cent is way too big to represent like a single compute cycle on a GPU, right? So I really see an interesting opportunity in maybe a few years from now, where Bitcoin drives the economic activity of distributed agents, and those agents are all supported by like this dramatic uptick in power availability.
Very interesting.
What do you think?
Very interesting indeed.
It's a newer idea, so I'm
Yeah.
floating it. So
Yeah, the way I'm thinking of it, like I- and to go back to what we were talking about earlier, you mentioned OpenAI, right? That's Sam Altman.
yeah,
Ugh. We need another 100, right? Different operators, competing AIs. And let's say you want to get a task completed, you could ask all 100, and they'll give you a snippet of what they've done, and then you can pay a micro payment to get the rest of it, and then another micro payment to um, complete that transaction from that one that you think is offering you the best value, which should obviously the AI should learn and drive better competition. That's just what sprung to my mind straight away. Unfortunately, at the moment, there's only one, two, or three players in the AI space.
I mean, there's a lot. The thing is that over the last year, it's sort of the likely outcome for AI infrastructure has sort of shifted. It first, we thought that we'd have a lot of specialized models, so you're going to train lots of different models that would have specialized abilities and skills
Mm-hmm.
based trained on different data sets. But Meta released Llama, which is open source, and a lot of these models have such good general knowledge that it may be that this idea of specialized models doesn't have doesn't have legs, but their
We
ability
had
to access data.
we had the
Mhm.
Bitcoin one, didn't we? Spirit of Satoshi. Just
Yeah,
for
that was
the
cool.
listeners to have an idea of like what you're talking about, specialized. You ask AI, is Bitcoin yada yada yada, and you get like this stock answer from Chat GPT, which could just be pulled from Google or some FUD articles, wherever they're getting it from. So the idea of Spirit of Satoshi was, if you wanted to ask a question about Bitcoin, you could ask it Spirit of Satoshi AI, and you would be guaranteed to be getting very good, uh, experienced,
Yeah,
well vetted information.
totally. And that's a really cool project. But like ultimately, right, what that project did was was close a gap, which was that, ChatGPT had not been trained on Satoshi's writings. Like it's there's no like reason that you wouldn't just have larger and larger models that just include better and better data. You're right. There's the whole vetting thing too, which is another topic. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, like if you tell like an agent that's like your personal assistant, here are some stats. Please do this thing until it's done.
Mhm.
You know, it goes out on the internet. It talks to other agents. Maybe you ask it something about Bitcoin. It's like, oh, I'm going to find Spirit of Satoshi, right? I'm going to pay a few sats in order to like get some queries back from them. And the ability to kind of like make economic decisions, again, economic decisions meaning like um, distributing resources efficiently. You need that. If you tell your agent to go do something, it needs to have the power to actually get something done, right? And it can only do those things if there's some way of acquiring resources. And so it needs something to trade those resources for. And that has to be, I mean, I don't think it has to be Bitcoin, but like definitionally, I just don't see any other way to do it. Like, I don't know if there's any other form of money that would allow for, again, micropayments and final settlement. If you have those things, and the thing is, Bitcoin is it because you can't have final settlement in anything else because you know, as we know, um, any economy will converge upon the strongest form of money, the hardest form of money, and Bitcoin is that. It can't be harder because it already has Lindy and so on, and you know, universal recognition and so on. So it's like the network effects of Bitcoin are so strong. I just don't see any other way of building that technology. I actually wonder what Balaji would say about this, because he, you know, like I said, he had this machine payable web concept, and I read up on it recently, but I haven't really seen him talk about it. But I feel like we need to kind of re-examine that idea in light of like so many new AI tools coming online and just this old, outdated monetization, sort of business model where for its enterprise, you're paying for seats, and like for consumers, you're paying $10 a month. Like it strikes me as outdated, and I just feel like we need new business models that are more granular.
Interesting. And Balaji, I don't know, just I got to get a little dig out there. I think he's too busy at the moment defending his capital investment into cloud seeding projects,
Oh,
which,
really? What's
yeah,
going on with that? I don't know anything about that. Cloud seeding, like
yeah,
contrails,
yeah,
like clouds, not like cloud computing. What is that?
cloud, yeah, exactly, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Weather modification, which
okay.
he's yeah, he invested in a company. Oh, what's the name of it? Rainmaker. This
Hmm.
guy appeared on Pomp's show and claims to be a Bitcoiner, although I can't imagine any Bitcoiner coming up with any defensible way to, you know, to tell you that spraying silver iodide into clouds to make it rain is a good idea. But yeah, nonetheless,
Yeah,
Balaji invested in that company and
I didn't know that.
has spent time defending the atrocious flooding that happened in Oman and Dubai,
Hmm.
and just recently in Valencia as well, which
Hmm.
you can directly link to cloud seeding projects
Wow.
close by.
Wow.
Yeah,
We
crazy.
passed in Tennessee where I am, we passed a law very
That's right.
recently that prevents people.
Geoengineering, yeah, of
Yeah,
any
prevents
sort.
you. Yeah. You knew about
Yeah.
that? So that
How?
made like,
Yes, I've been deep
oh,
down
because
this
you talked
rabbit
to
hole.
Frida, is that why? No.
No, no, not at all. But I do see she retweets what I tweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just one of these rabbit holes I got pulled into and fell into towards the beginning of this year,
Hmm.
reluctantly, because two or three guys, Bitcoiners, have been pulling me in. They're like, Princey, wake up! You got to look at this. This is crazy. And
Yeah.
when you see it, it's like anything. When you see it, you can't unsee it. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, so it's just strange that you know, you brought Balaji's name up, and I've seen him tweeting about this. Yeah, in defense of it, and it's just like, what are you?
Hmm.
How? Like, this is absolute insanity. And it's
Hmm.
great to see that Tennessee have banned geoengineering, and it's great to see as well the Overton window is shifting, because RFK talking about, you know, if and when he was to, you know, become the president, or and now, at least be part of Trump's administration, he would fight tooth and nail to put an end to geoengineering,
Hmm.
which he knows full well has been going on for decades because he's fought these guys. He's litigated against the people that have been dumping all the crap in the water systems and the
Right.
oceans in the
Right.
past, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, he knows. So anyway, tangent.
No, I mean, I think we've come to like this realization as a society that that we've been hubristic about like how much we can really control. And when you and I were growing up, it was just a given that technology would overcome like all limitations. And so it would just be like, well, of course the weather will be controlled one day because it'll everything will be like t you know, and then um and then we realize that there's a lot more going on like that we don't realize, and that even when we think the science is sound, even when we think we've done enough testing, there's like there's this unaccounted for variable or or many variables that have bad outcomes. And it's almost like a simplification. It's just like, let's just try to do less stuff, try to
Less
get
is
a few
more.
things right, and not try to do everything at once because it just has disastrous consequences.
Yeah, it certainly
Yeah.
does. All right, Dave, I've got to ask you the last question. If you had
Okay.
one final orange pill left to give to somebody, who would you give it to and why?
Ooh. Hmm. I was not prepared for this one. Last orange pill to give somebody. Has to be living today, right?
Yeah.
Um, I guess I would give it to I'm trying to think of like the funniest possible answer. Maybe Christine Lagarde, just to watch what would happen.
Yeah. All right, Christine. Yes. Well, yeah. Such few words to say about that person. All right, mate. Well, how can people reach out to you if there's anything they've heard here today and they feel as though they might be able to add value to Coinbits? Are you hiring? What's the roadmap? And where can people interact with you?
Absolutely. So go to coinbits.app. That's the website, and that's the most important thing for people to do. Coinbits.app, and accounts are free. We also have a paid subscription that gets you really, really cheap Bitcoin. So if you are buying a certain amount, you have to do the math. But if you're buying a certain amount, it's well worth it to pay the $10 a month for the subscription. You get very, very inexpensive trades between Bitcoin and dollars, so you can kind of choose how much you're exposed. And so go there, make an account. I'm on Twitter, Contrary Mo, at Contrary and then MO. And you can follow me there. And yeah, but coinbits.app is the most important. So I really hope you guys check it out. We are UX and product focused. So we love to talk to users. I do user calls every week. Um, Go check it out, sign up, and then reach out to me and tell me what you think, because I'd love to hear it.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for everything that you're doing for Bitcoin and helping us get as many people interacting with Bitcoin as possible and educated about it. It's great to see. And yeah, appreciate your time.
Thank you, Daniel. It's been really cool, and I love the long form. I love this long form conversation. It's a lot of fun to kind of explore a lot of different things. So I appreciate the opportunity, man. Thank you.
No problem at all. Have a great afternoon.
You too.